Now you notice the EF reading is less than 100. Yesterday it was 300 in exactly the same spot. If you look at my last video and compare it, and the RF reading is high compared to the 0 to 1 that was on the sofa. So if I took that detector to my sofa right now, it would be 0 to 1 RF reading. So my head is tagged, and my knee is tagged, and that was my knee right there. That 19, 17, that's my knee being pulsed. My bladder is also being tagged. So every increase in the RF reading, which is this number right here, this number right here, every increase and decrease, every pulse up and down is a hit on my body, somewhere on my body. So somebody is constantly logged on and is constantly hitting. Several people, maybe, most likely. But judging from the EF reading, I would say 1 or 2 people, maybe. Most likely 1. Temperature went up to 23. And just got a pulse on the hip. There was a pulse on the head. And that's my hand. That's my hand on there. Notice the huge jump. Take my hand away. So when I put my hand on, it went from 70 to 1820, 1984. So my hand is tagged at a very high power. Of course, I'm being trapped inside of my unit. Notice the EMF reading also goes up. Let's put my hand back on. Look at the EMF reading. And look at the EF reading. Notice the RF reading is not affected, but the EMF reading and the EF reading is affected. Different technology being used to tag my hand. Put my hand back on. Notice the RF drops when I put my hand on. The EF increases exponentially, and the EMF increases as well. So that's the big number at the bottom. So the 8.8 is RF, 1500 plus is the EF, and the 18.7 is the EMF. So the RF is not affected by my hand, but the EF and the EMF is. Different technology used to tag my hand. So when you go to court and you say, gee, you're being experimented with, and you present this data, is it possible for a judge to say, no, nothing's going on? If I present it day after day after day after day after day, and there's a flag next to my name that indicates that I am being monitored, so that 28 was a scan on the chest. That 20 is a scan on the chest. That 20 is a scan on the chest. And every time it goes up to 20, I take a sip of my tea. So I'll demonstrate. That's me taking a sip of my tea. See that 20 there? I just took a sip. See at 19? That was a sip of tea. So the reason the hand is tagged is because your activity, your actions is being monitored. Whatever it is you do, if you put your hand on your eyes, it's tracked. If you put your hand on a pot, hold a cup of tea, you know, the computer that's monitoring this knows exactly what you're doing. And and the computer is looking at you share. That 20, that's a scan on the chest, on the back. The person on the computer is looking at you share, not the computer. So your activities are being tracked and recorded by the computer 24/7. That 35 is a hit on the head, on the right side back of the head. That 35. So let me show you the hand reading. Notice the EMF went up to 24, 26. Take the hand away, down to 17, 18. Those numbers reflect the power that with which I'm being pulsed. Put my hand back on. The EMF goes up to 23, 24, 25, 26, and the EF also goes up. So it pulses down to 19, and it pulses all the way back up, because it has to be pulsed up and down, or else I'll be cooked. Take the hand away. The EMF goes all the way down to 18. And the EF goes to the range of 50 to 70. And notice the graph underneath. Notice the graph underneath, this graph right here. The graph that's disappearing off the screen is my hand. That 46 is a scan on the chest and on the face. So notice the graph levels off at the bottom of the screen. So I put my hand on and notice the graph. It jumps. See how erratic the graph gets when my hand is on there? As it climbs, 23. So notice the graph all the way up and the pulsing up and down. Notice all the peaks in the graphs, up and down, up and down. It's never a straight line. It's always in a pulsed fashion. My ear is hurting right now. And I'll show you the blood pressure readings, which I'll start taking. Up and down, up and down, up and down. So I'm going to take my hand away. So this is my hand on it, constantly on. Take my hand away and look at the graph. So the graph is reflecting the EMF. Oh, I'm sorry. MG is the EMF. So the RF is pulsing through. And the graph is representing, I believe, all three. So I just got a pulse on my knee, on my foot and calf muscle. So that was a 16 right there. So I'm going to put my hand back on there. And the graph rises, pulses up in an up and down fashion. It's never a straight line. Notice how many peaks there are in this graph. So it pulses up and down, up and down, up and down, going up, and then up and down, up and down, up and down, coming down. And then it changes the range as it pulses up and down on a smaller scale. So the peaks get smaller, but the frequency gets higher. So we have a big peak there, one peak, pulsing up and down to the peak. Then it pulse down, and then it pulses through at a lower range, up and down. Always in that pattern. It's never a straight line. It cannot be a straight line. So an algorithm is being used. So I'm going to take my hand away. So my ear is being pulsed right now. So my ear is starting to hurt, the left ear. There is a 29, and I just burped. So that was a hit on the chest. Notice the temperature went up to 23.5. And here is the temperature underneath my right arm. It's 37.4. Underneath the left arm, 36.5. So that's also a consistent finding. The right side of the body is consistently hotter than the left, and it decreases. 37.2. 37.1. So I don't have a temperature. I don't have a fever. So the left side is 36.4. I don't have a fever. And my forehead is 36.4. A little bit hotter than 36.2. That's because my head is being pulsed. So I'm gonna take my blood pressure readings. So my blood pressure is 109/71. So it's going on 31 minutes. I'm going to take my blood pressure reading one more time. So the EF reading is a lot lower than the 200, 300, 400 that we saw yesterday. A lot lower. Which indicates that not as many people are logged on. Yesterday, more than one was logged on. So my blood pressure is 104/65. So 109/71 to 104/65, a heart rate from 72 to 75. So the blood pressure is all over the place. So the heart rate at 9:25 was 112/79. So I heard outside right now, there's a comment that somebody's trying to get a new match for me. I'm being reseeded. So this is the cost of being reseeded. And in other words, you're going to get a heart attack. People are going to be logged into you, and your blood pressure is going to be all over the place. Your heart rate is going to be all over the place. Your body temperature is going to be all over the place. And you're supposed to get used to it. As I indicated in some of my tweets, with the coronavirus, they're leading up to a chip, which is totally unnecessary. The chip is going to indicate whether you've been vaccinated or not. You'll be forced vaccine. There'll be a forced vaccination process. And the vaccines that you've gotten are going to be documented on the chip along with all your other vitals. So you make your decision. You want to be chipped and you want to be subjected to this kind of torture, because once you're chipped, you're going to be monitored. Because right now, in the reason I'm being used as a guinea pig is to train people to monitor people, others, log on to them, chipped or not. You don't need a chip, but the chip has the data that that will track you. Also, the chip. And if you're not allowed to be in a certain area because you don't have a certain vaccine, or your temperature is running, 0.2 degrees higher, you're going to be red alerted, and somebody's going to come and get you. So what's being done here at 25 Bamberg Circle by PK and his friends, because he has a contract to run these black operations, a black experiment, is intended to be rolled out to everybody. What I'm demonstrating here is the consequences of being chipped and tracked. It's about trafficking. It's also about controlling a population. The trafficking is just a byproduct, because targets are supposed to be used as guinea pigs, and criminals are abusing the cover of the flagging and the targeting to traffic. But it's really about controlling a population. It's really about controlling you, just as in China. I suspect that people are being chipped in China and nobody's talking about it. Covertly, overtly, I suspect that most of the population in China has been chipped. Keep in mind, I don't have to tell them. Human rights are not respected in China. And if this is being done in Canada, what I'm demonstrating, and in Canada, we're supposed to have human rights, and it's being done anyways. Could you imagine in a country that does not have any respect for human rights, what's being done? And there are no controls, and there are no human rights tribunal to go to. If you notice, in Ontario, our Human Rights Tribunal is being undermined by underfunding. They're cutting the services. So I'm demonstrating. Do you want to be subjected to this? I'm demonstrating what you're going to be subjected to once you're chipped and once somebody's monitoring you, whether it be a computer or whether it be a human being on a computer. This is exactly what's going to happen. Your chip is going to be read 24/7, and the amount of power turned up on you and your children are going to be determined by what's being read on the chip. This is torture. This is inhumane. This is against every human rights we were born with. This is practicing communism in Canada. So did you notice that the RF reading went up there, pulse through a higher number when somebody's knocking in the loading dock? My hip on that knock is synchronized with the high reading, which is synchronized with a hit on the ear. That last one was a hit on the ear. Right now I'm being hit on the ear. Knock in the loading dock was a hit on the hips. So people who are monitoring on a computer or on a cell phone, these people are also chipped. Keep in mind, it's a training program. So for these people to log on to somebody else and train you, they have to be trained themselves. So they have owners, they have managers. They're being trained in a system, in a pyramidal form, structure. So you start at the top and the elite, quote unquote, I'm using that word not necessarily as a rich, but let's just say the ones that think of themselves as superior. They use you and pass you around on the top of the rung, and then you get used and you get passed around to the very bottom of the pyramid. And this is meant for everyone. Everyone. This is a satanic system that's being brought into play. It's not only communistic, it's satanic, it's evil, it's anti-human. You will not be able to practice religion. You will not be able to be spiritual. You will not be able to do yoga. You will not be able to meditate, because these things would be considered, against the rules of your masters. You're going to be owned. Right now, the person in the loading dock is the owner. PK, the Chinese contractor who's working for the highest of the high, the elite, his version of the elite, is given the right to rape people at 25 Bamberg Circle, as per the messages that he left. And that huge number that just went by there in the RF reading, that's a pulse on the head. This is how you're stupefied. When they pulse your head, you can't think straight. This is why you're registered back as retarded, because you're made retarded. So PK, who is the Chinese master, subcontracts in the building. So the Chinese traffickers, stalkers, criminals, they infiltrate, and that was a hit on the right side of the head and ear. They choose people, they flag them, lie, flag them, traffic them, pass them around, I've been passed around in the Chinese community for a long, long time. I've been accessed subtly for a long, long time. The people who had their name on the accounts were my owners. They were informants to the cops, the dirty cops who were flagging, and they were selling, their traffickers. These signals is a result of being logged on to by people in the building and of being tortured because I am speaking out. I am exposing it. That huge number that went by there, that 40 something, that was a hit on the bladder. So I'm going to stop there.